Thank you very much for having me here in Khaki Lab's talks, weekly talks. And so today I'll be talking to you about the early artisans who created some of the earliest stone monuments in southern India. So before we start, I would like to just remember that behind every beautiful stone building that we see, we must imagine that there are these people with cracked thumbnails and a lot of hard work into just cutting the stone and shaping them and making this beautiful monument that we see. So today, I just want to remember these people, and they are the people about whom this talk is going to be mainly. Though we will be looking at the buildings mostly because these are all bygone people. So yeah, I'll take you away to this place called. I'm sure many of you have seen this place, but just in case some people haven't, I'll give you a brief introduction to Badami and the valley of the river Malaprabha, and then we will talk about the architecture and the people who created it. So so Badami, Aihole, and Pattadakal are situated closer in the valley of the river called Malaprabha, which originates in the eastern flanks of the Western Ghats in North Karnataka, in the northern portion of the Western Ghats there, and then it flows down and it ultimately meets the river Krishna. But before it meets Krishna, it travels through a valley. I mean, this is a satellite picture showing this blue line that you can see going meandering through the center of the picture. That is Malaprabha, river Malaprabha, and it enters this valley. This what you're seeing here are the great knobs of sandstone. So basically low flat-topped hills of sandstone which enclose the river on either side. The valley is not more than 8 to 10 kilometers at its widest, and it travels for some a bit more than 25 kilometers through this valley. And just before it enters the valley, to the north you have the site of Badami, and somewhere in the middle, where it turns very conspicuously towards the north, you have the site of Pattadakal, and where it exits the valley, you have the site of Aihole. There are many other minor sites also, which some of which we will touch upon when we go through the talk. So this is the river Malaprabha. From somewhere close to Aihole, you can see it. Very often when you go to Badami and other places, you don't see the river. But this place close to Aihole is where you can actually see it going through this. And so you can see the bounding hills of sandstone. They're not very tall. You can see it in the distance here. And in between, because of the river Malaprabha, you have a lot of these irrigated fields and all that. So let's look at Badami first. So there's a natural, all that you're seeing here, again, is a satellite view. You can see the cliffs of what is called the North Fort. And then it's a C-shaped or a U-shaped valley. You can see it out here like this. And in the somewhere in the 6th century, this ruler called Pulakeshi, who founded the early Chalukyan dynasty of Badami. So from around the middle of 6th century to middle of 8th century, they were around 200 years, they were ruling this region from Badami as the capital. It was called Vatapi in those days. So he created a bund here. So all the rainwater runoff from here collected into this artificial tank known as the Agastya Tirtha. And the famous cave temples, the rock cut temples of Badami are on the south fort on these cliffs here. And the other temple, that structural temple that you build by putting blocks of stone together, that is there on the north fort. And in the east also you have the very spectacular Bhutnath complex, which projects scenically into the reservoir. And Badami town, what you see in the west in that thing is probably sitting over where the ancient settlement of Badami is. So we haven't done any excavation there, for example. The old town of Vatapi is sleeping under the soil below this settlement, that modern settlement that you see in the west. And just to give you a feel of the place, Badami is a very sleepy little town. I mean, I know I'm using the cliched language for that, but it's just another of the dusty little towns that you find in North Karnataka. So there's one main road, and this is a big monument. There is the KSRTC bus stand there, and there is this one main road where all the action happens. Most of the action happens rather, and there are the side roads in which the weekly markets and other stuff happens. So you wouldn't find much to distinguish it from the other towns of the Deccan, the North Karnataka region. But even when you're walking among the streets here, which is some of them are dirty, some of them are narrow and crowded, you have a reminder that you are in a very special place. You can see part of the fort wall in this picture. Or here, there's some dilapidated buildings in the foreground, but behind what you're seeing is one of the early temples that students of architecture learn about. This is called the Lower Shivalaya. It's scenically kept on top of a rock. This one is called the Malagiti Shivalaya. So you have the sheep and goats milling here on the way out to pasture. But behind that, you see one of the earliest stone temples in southern India. And most of the people live here even today as agro-pastoralists. They either practice agriculture like you see here, or they are pastoralists. They have cattle as well as goat and sheep. And scenes like these are commonplace even today. Like most of the travel, there you see caravans of bullock carts heading through the place here. You see, but like I told you, even there's a close by town of Banashankari there. And if you go to the marketplace there, you see a very ordinary sight, but then see what the bullock is tied to. And you know that there's a lot of, and this colonnade in the background here, you know that you're seeing some of the early architecture of the place. And this is just other scenes. So you see very rural scenes here, like this, people herding sheep and cattle and all that through the roads. But you also, and also there are these nomadic Lambadis who also go through the landscape. But in the middle of all this, or showing a bullock, which is a commonplace sight there. But in the middle of all this rural, typical rural landscape here, you also have some of the the landmark temples. When any student of architecture is familiar with, there's a Virupaksha temple at Pattadakal, or some of the masterpiece of sculpture, this 18-armed Shiva or Nataraja is one of the, I think, one of the wonderful masterpieces of Chalukyan sculpture. So, and the landscape is very beautiful too, because you have the sandstone cliffs which have been weathered into fantastic shapes, and it's also a heaven for climbers. So this is one of the chimneys, I mean, one of the pro-like structures which a lot of rock climbers climb. And there's a small climbing club also in Badami. And this is another wonderful natural masterpiece near Aihole, which is produced by the architects of this is nothing but wind and water. And you have plenty of things like this. So I like to imagine that these early architects who built there imbibe some of their playfulness and playing with the landscape from these natural structures. You can see here a huge balanced rock close to Badami in a place called Kutukankeri. You can see that it's just a little bit of neck here which holds it here. And some of the spirit has been, this is the same thing, another view of it, has been imbibed by the architects, I would say, because if you, this is yet another structure near Aihole, closer to Aihole. You can see that it's a naturally weathered structure, and the people, you can see the scale of it, and the way that huge slab-like thing is balanced on it. I'm sure that the early architects who worked there imbibed some of this penchant for playing with forms and all from here. Because if you look at Badami, this is from the South Fort. On top of the South Fort, if you're looking towards the North Fort, you find that most of the structures, there's unfinished mantapas that we will have a look at sometime later. The lower Shivalaya, the upper Shivalaya. Here in the far background, you can see the Malagati Shivalaya. They're all placed in, sensible people would have put it down on proper ground. But what they've done here is that this is another closer view of it. You can see the lower Shivalaya here, the upper Shivalaya here, and the open mantapas here. They all stand up on their own large boulder. And the Bhutanath, if you stand in the east and look towards the west, you can see this Bhutanath complex of temple, which is nucleus is early Chalukyan, and then later on other dynasty architects have added on to that. Or this 11th century temple, a later temple, very playfully placed on top of a big rock here. And if you need to really experience Badami at its best, you have to climb a little bit. I mean, I strongly feel that the architects themselves have climbed here. I'll give you some examples for that. But if you climb, you see the beautiful, the beautiful landscape of Badami here. So this is yet another picture of it. And so this is a couple of interns who had worked with me, Meghna and Kadambari. They had, I'm not able to find the play for this. Sorry, just one moment. I'll just share it again. I'm not able to. Yeah, you can see that when this is right on the eastern part of the place, from where a beautiful view of the entire. You can see it somewhere out here. And so this is Meghna and this is Kadambari. They helped me with a lot of work in Badami. So now whether it's human beings or not, some of the other people who helped me explore the region, these are some of them. This is Raja, the dog who came with us, and some of our wonderful explorations near Aihole. And you can see that he is also very good at climbing. No? So whether you're human or not, you understand Malaprabha Valley best when you're able to climb a little bit. Yeah. And these are the kind of views you get if you climb. So if you climb on the cliffs above East Fort, you can see the Bhutnath temple, the rock called Panchalinganapadi, the rock cut temples of Badami are here, and all the structural monuments of the North Fort are what you see out here. And also you get to see some, this is a place closer to Kutukankeri where this person is showing me a panel of rock art. and that's somewhere at the junction of this upper rock with the ground here. You can see it here. There's a person holding a shield and a sword and standing there and facing what seems to be the sun. We don't know what it meant to the creator of this rock art, but all these things are scattered in the hills, and you need to do a little bit. You have to be a little bit adventurous to get to see some of these things. Or this one. Now I was telling you that the people who created these also probably had something to do with had a penchant for heights. So you can see that little overhang here. Below that is a beautiful rock art panel from the Mesolithic. It could be anything up to from 10,000 to 25,000 years old. You see a hunting party, a man and a woman, and some other people around, and a set of a herd of wild boar that you can see here, a sounder of wild boar. And this is a and the figures are drawn in what has come to be known as the Malaprabha style, because they have a very typical way in which they treat the faces, the bodies, the thighs are shown as this way. I'll show you another picture to show. Before that, we'll take a closer look at it. So you can see the faces. I mean, if I put this up at a gallery of modern art, people would have believed that it's a contemporary creation. That it shows the kind of artistic sensibilities that the people, the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers had here. And yeah, this is another panel from near Kutkankeri. You can see the person has been shown holding something which looks like a boomerang. God knows what it is. But you can see that the thighs have been treated the same way. There was a distinctive style of depiction of humans, which is very common in the Malaprabha Valley. There are a lot of rock art panels. I won't go more in detail into that. And also the people. So these are the prehistoric occupants who created the rock art. But then there is this foundational inscription of Badami, which talks about when Pulakeshi created in the middle of 6th century. That is carved out here in the rock. And to be honest, even to access it today to take a stampage, it's a very adventurous activity. Somebody has to suspend you from the cliff above, and somebody has to push you with a pole so that you close to the rock, so you can take a stampage of it. So this is where the early Chalukyan artisan has inscribed the text telling that how the fort was founded by Pulakeshi. He has also signed his name here. Koli Manchi, his name was, and so. Yeah, it was. One thing is sure, Koli Manchi was not afraid of heights. And then Badami, like I told you, is a hot, dusty place. So the most sensible thing that anyone could do is to find some shade and sleep. Once again, if you're not a human or whether you're a human, the best thing is to find some shade and sleep here. Only crazy people like us who are documenting the place would go around in the sun. But then suddenly the weather could. The same day I took this picture, just after in the afternoon, it started raining heavily like this. So this is from the Bhutnath temple looking towards a partially dry tank. And when it rains in Badami, something very magical happens. I mean, first of all, that sandstone transforms into a very different sort of a texture. But then other special thing is that there's a waterfall which starts up from the eastern cliffs, and it forms a beautiful backdrop to this. More about this later when we talk about the artisans. I'll tell you some secret about this waterfall. So this is how the Bhutnath temple complex looks like. It's wonderful at sunset when the whole place gets lit up properly. And this is the Bhutnath complex seen from above there. And the center of this what you see here, and the Mantapa in front, this is what was the Chalukyan, early Chalukyan, the 8th century, whatever the building. And all these things have come up later in the later Chalukyan period, which is about 200 years later. And this is a closer view of that. And I told you about the spectacular. The same spirit of adventure was carried forward by the later builders, and this is built in the 11th century, when Badami was not a capital anymore, but the construction activity continued to happen here. Monuments were created. This is the Bhutnath at sunset. And this is what looks like a ugly painted modern structure, but it's got its origins in the Vijayanagara period. And this temple is also kept very scenically, where a couple of gorgeous cross. And to see this also from the top, to get these views also, this is Nagaraj who helped me climb up there. And he's a bit of a climber himself. He is part of that climbing club that you have in Badami. And I was telling you about the monuments of the North Fort, how they have, each one is kept very precariously perched on its own boulder. And you can see the open mantapas in the foreground here, the lower Shivalaya. And again, this another view of the same thing at dawn. And let us now look at this little couple of these open mantapas. This is the view of the lower Shivalaya from the open mantapas. And this is the upper Shivalaya. And it is not kept on the, it's kept on the lip of a very steep drop. One of the early Karnataka Dravida buildings. And you can see that it's not been kept. There's so much space to the right of it. but it has been kept very playfully on the edge of the thing. And I also think that somewhere it was supposed, the tower was supposed to mirror a natural knob of rock which happens out here. And the Malagiti Shivalaya, which is a little bit away from the North Fort, it is kept on its own boulder. It doesn't look very dramatic here. You can see the town of Badami around it. But when you see this, you can understand how we know the name of this architect. He has inscribed it there. It's called Aryaminchi Upadhyaya. Now, Aryaminchi Upadhyaya did not want to keep it on the ground. He placed it very dramatically perched on its boulder here. And there's a lot of undocumented monuments around Badami. So if you climb the hills and walk around there, you can see that this was a temple which has collapsed now. You can see the niche of the idol which have been carved into the rock, and the temple was built around it, but it's collapsed now. These are not, you won't find it in any guidebook to Badami. This is how the collapsing is looking like. It's also kept at the focus of a local little water body that you see out here. And then there's another later monument, but it's very interesting because you have these two temples here. They're not the important thing. To go along the side and go into there's a natural weathering feature around a rock pool where some later artisan, maybe 12th century or 14th century, have carved a lot of images here. There's an inscription very interestingly in Marathi in this part of it. And here you have Kolhapur Mahalakshmi shown here. And it says that Kolhapur Mahalakshmi came here to please one of her devotees called Ravi Tridandi. He's been depicted here. Anyway, I was just trying to show you a feel of the place around this and how they have adapted very nicely to the very dramatic landscape around. This is a very natural feature. This is a rock pool surrounded by a natural weathering feature called Taphonas, and that has been carved into this all these deities here. And let us look at we got an opportunity to look into the minds of the early architects when we saw these unfinished. I mean, it is if you look at any guidebook on Badami, they say that there is two open mantapas which have been destroyed or vandalized during the 13 years in which the Pallavas invaded Badami. The Pallavas in Tamil Nadu were constantly at war with the Chalukyas, and for 13 years they had occupied Badami. So the people think that it has been demolished by them. So very funny thing is that it's even though it's placed on a rock, it's very prominent. You can see it from anywhere in Badami. The entry to it is very narrow. Now this is Kadambari who had helped me work with this this particular aspect. And you can see you have to go sideways up this narrow passage. You have to even lean backwards if you have to go through it. At its narrowest, it's some 70 centimeters. So I used to wonder how people took the building materials there. So when you climb up, this is where you emerge, and when you look up, this is where you see the monuments. So I got this idea that this monument, you can see that partially it is rock cut. This part of it is cut out of the rock, and there's a lot of place where rock has been removed here. So I thought probably these people who went up with only their tools, they cut the rock here, shaped them into this columns and beams and assembled the structure. And so Kadambari wanted to do a small project with me, and we thought we will look at the amount of rock that has been quarried and compare it to the amount of rock which is there in the monuments. And we found something very interesting. So you can see this part of it is rock cut. It just, and the rest of it, the removed rock has been shaped into blocks of stone, and they have been assembled to create the upper structure. So this is another. Then we found that there's some other. I mean, a lot of people have talked about it also. There's a sort of foundation or a sort of a rock plinth to the west of the structure also, and you can see that very clearly here. So if you look at it from the upper Shivalaya, you can see the portions of it that you can't climb to. And when you look at it, this is from the you have a single-storied mantapa here and a double-storied mantapa. So when we climbed on the top of the single-storied mantapa, you can see this is the view that you see here. These rocks and these steps and everything are rock cut, and then you have the other structure coming up there. Nobody knew what the purpose of this was. A lot of hypotheses have been advanced. People say that this is where the king used to hold his court and stuff like that. But and you can see that where these two girls are standing, how much of rock has been removed. So again, closer to the single-storied mandapa, you can see the lower portion of it, where these elephants have been carved and all that, are rock cut, whereas the upper portion is structural, where they have used blocks of stones. And this is a double-storied mantapa here, and the basement portion of it, you can see that they are unfinished. Here you can see the plinth has been carved very well. Here it's a lump of rock, it is yet to be carved. So what we found is that this is an unfinished monument. The Pallavas haven't vandalized it. It is just an unfinished monument. Why they left it unfinished, we do not know. And there are some inscriptions here. This one says Sri Nalpayan, and there are three names which have been there: Sri Nalpayan, Sri Tanuchalvan, and this one says Sri Govindan. Okay, so this is an old Kannada inscription of 7th century characters, and we also found a hitherto published what do you call name Sri Kama. It's written backwards from right to left. Sri Kama also worked on this monument. So interestingly, Nalpayan has a name carved in another monument. A nearby site called what do you call Mahakuta. There is a temple here on which one of the pillars you have Nalpayan's name again. So he was an established architect who worked on the Nagara monument, the northern style Nagara monuments of Mahakuta. And so, but this is in somewhere in the 7th century, and we believe that this open monuments are probably begun in the early what do you call 6th century. And for some reason, Nalpayan, Tanichelvan, and Govindan had tried to complete the unfinished monument. So it has been worked on by a couple of architects. Now, how it has been put together, you can see that these are the columns coming up there. There are these brackets, and above that there is something which is a combination of a beam and an eave. And then they have placed again slabs on top of it. And fortunately, they've left a lot of clues around. So near the Bhutnath temple, there is this unassembled. You can see that these columns that you can see out here and these beam eave kind of structures, with them you can actually build a structure something like this. What you do is you take these columns and keep them standing up, and then you place it upside down, so these columns are coming up here, and then you will be able to assemble a small mantapa that you can see what you're laying out here. So we could understand the methods that they used for creating these structures, and some of the columns here. And another big clue that we got was when we looked at this and zoomed into this portion, the top portion of the what do you call the double-storied mantapa, you can see that there is a niche here which people had missed out on seeing. And this is usually when you place an idol there. So it was meant to be a temple, is what we are trying to put forward. But very interestingly, the temple did not have an idol on the ground floor, and it had it on the upper floor. We know that the Malaprabha Valley was a place where early artisans experimented with form, and we think that this was one of the experimental things which they did not complete. And so we documented the entire structure. I won't bore you with the details here. We made 3D models of it. And then we tried to look at whether all these components, what you see here, these columns, beams, and all that, could have been assembled from the rock carved out from here. So we took the measurement. We found that it could be done. What you see in the orange out here are the blocks from which all these things could have been carved. All the structural members could have been carved, and we found that they could easily fit in, even accounting for wastage. We also found some carved members which have been used very unimaginatively to create the wall around the structure. And then we got a little bit more ambitious. We thought that can we recreate what they intended to make? We can get into the minds of the early architects and try to see what they were trying to complete. So our first attempt was a big failure, because this looks, when we showed it to one of the experts on early Chalukyan architecture, Professor Padigar, he said that this looks more like a multi-stored car park than any Chalukyan building. So we decided to study Chalukyan buildings like the Ladkhan temple at Aihole, this is part of normally you used to seeing temples like the Nagara temples of north, the Dravida temples of south, but there's also a local idiom, flat roof temples like this with an upper structure called Malaprabha style by the art historian George Mitchell. So we try to look at what is the Malaprabha style of building, and we also looked at the entry to what is called the Durga temple at Aihole. And so we see that there's a slower central portion which is raised and it's flat, and you have sides which are sloping. We tried it out. This is another building in the same idiom which is there in Aihole, the Gaudra Gudi. And then we tried it here and saw that if you do it here, the upper floor will become too small for any person to access here. So just by this requirement, we realized that it can only come to these two things, where one in which you have the central portion of it is fully made like this, and the sides you have central portion of it double storied, and on the sides you have lean-to roofs like this. Or the central portion, you can build it only for 2 bays, and then the rest of it you have a leaning roof, which is a hip-ended roof, which winds around the main structure. So we did drawings for these things and all that, and this is so we feel that this is how it would have looked like. I'll just cut forward to it, and this looks very much like the Ladkhan temple. We are pleasantly surprised that this is what the architects would have made it if they had completed it. Now we do not know why this structure did not get completed. That's something that we have not been able to figure out. So this is while we tried to get into the minds of the early artisans. And then we found that I'll be showing you some of the less known structures in Badami. Now, the main ones, you can look it up in any guidebook to Badami. This is something which you will not find in any guidebook, because this is a place where you have, this is at the base of that big rock I showed you near the Agastya Tirtha, where you have a little cave, which local people say the sunlight falls in that on every day of the year. And it doesn't have any idol. It has only the sun symbol which has been painted on the rear wall. And then, the Chalukyans, everyone knows their big construction, but they also had little constructions that, like you can see here, little excavation. There's a small unfinished rock cut cave in Badami. These are rock cut little excavations which you find in close to the Rawalpindi cave temple in Aihole. And then coming back to our little rock where the sunlight falls. So if you go inside that and look at it, there's this big cliff of sandstone opposite it. So only when the sun climbs above that in the east, the light will fall into it. So this is how it looks like from the cliff. So when the sun comes above it, the sunlight will fall in this little cave here. We have documented it the equinox day this time that the sunlight. This is when the sunlight first falls on it, and you can see it. This is how it will look like when the sunlight falls on it, and it ties in with a local legend because the local. This is just before the sunlight falls on it. Next slide, you can see that the light has penetrated to the little structure. Now, what was it meant for? So what this is when the sunlight becomes stronger. And this is the view of the sun coming up from the cave when you look at it. So nearby we found an unfinished idol of Surya with Ganesha flanking him. So we know that it was definitely intended to do something to do with Surya. And then this is how, just to show you what a finished idol of Surya will look like. He is normally depicted standing on his chariot, drawn by 7 horses, and he holds 2 lotus flowers in his hands. Lotus buds or lotus flowers. So that's what this you can see is happening here. And this is, so we know that this is Surya. So nearby, there are other temples like this Malagati Shivalaya. It's called a Shivalaya, and today you have a linga in its sanctum. But we know that this was originally a temple to Surya, mainly because the Dwarapalas that you see in the previous picture, the Dwarapalas that you see here and here, they are Danda and Pingala, the 2 attendants of Surya. And this is how it faces again towards the east. So, who were these talented artisans? We have some names actually, because Badami has got a vast corpus of inscriptions. This just says Sri, it is incomplete here, the inscription. But you have a lot of names of artisans carved on the cliff faces near their creations and all that. Sometimes more than 200 names in this corpus. So, for example, in cave 3 of Badami, which is the most ornate cave that you find there, so there's a beautiful idol of Garuda with his wings like that on opposite the sanctum on the eave there. And on Garuda's wings here you can see a name. When we look close, it says Sri Nelavalke. So we know that the name of the ancient sculptor, he is called Nelavalke, and he is the one who carved the image of Garuda here. And then going to the quarries here in Aihole, you have an abandoned quarry site on this hill known as Meguti Hill, and this one has a this is probably a cave project which has begun, and there's an inscription which tells here that this quarry belongs to a guy called Sri Narasobban. So Narasobban is as an architect, and there's a lot of praises about him, and they talk about his guru being somebody called Utunan, and who is probably the architect of the Jain cave temple that you see nearby. Because so this is you can see here that a column has been sketched out here in some detail, and this is the inscription which extols the virtues of Narasobban. Now, you can see who was Narasobban, what was his speciality. Here he has tried to make a cave temple probably and abandoned it at some point of time. But in Aihole, there's another temple. This is a close-up view of the thing here, called the Huchapaya Gudi. It's on the outskirts in the south, and it's a Nagara-style temple. And here, on one of the pilasters here, you have an inscription of Narasobban again. So here, there's the porch of it. And on the porch, this is the inscription of Narasobban, which says that a temple architect like him was never there in whole of Jambudvipa and will never be there. Na bhuto na bhavishyati. He has never been, I mean, he's one of the one-time great architects of the land or something like that. To that effect, it's been written here. And there's a closer view of the inscription here in early Kannada script. And then to look at some of the most spectacular quarries, you have to go near Pattadakal. Nobody visits here. You will probably see some langurs and the langur herds and the people, the outlying ones which are alerting the main herd about intruders like us who go there. And there you have a lot of sketches by the artisans, inscriptions, and they have so many other things. So here they show a peacock here. Interestingly, there are a couple of camels. Now, there are no camels in Karnataka. And seeing some of the Nagara structures, the northern style structures, it's very easy to imagine that people from Gujarat or Malwa or Rajasthan might have been involved in the creation of those things. And you find a lot of images of camels in this quarry. There's another place where you have inscription that says Sri Veera Vidyadharan, Sri Matiragan, and all that. There's a Nandi shown here, idol of Ganesha and Durga, which have been carved here. And you can see some of the Trishulas, and it's exciting to see. This again is a Shivalinga, and they show a camel to the side of it. Some of the things that you see in Chalukyan sculpture, you can see studies for it at the quarry. One of the typical scenes that's shown on the plinth of many Chalukyan buildings is the battle between lions and elephants. So you can see the two elephants are here and lions are attacking them. You see the same thing. So you can see that in the basement of the Pattadakal Papanatha temple, you can see an elephant is here and two lions are attacking it. Here the tables have turned. You have one lion and two elephants are attacking it. Similarly, another wonderful thing that you can see here is this idol sketch study for a sculpture of Durga. You can see an unusual idol of Mahishasura Mardini. She is reaching back into the quiver to remove an arrow and slay the demon which is at the foot. And you know that this sculpture, which you find in one of the interior niches of the Papanatha temple, was carved, was conceived in this quarry about 5 kilometers away, and people have been looking at. Those artisans were actually living there and thinking about it, and then actually carved it and installed it inside the temple. You get to know about how they cut stone. This is the line along which the stone had to be cut. They marked points there. Then they marked out this oval-shaped wedge holes or whatever, scooped it out, inserted steel wedges and hammered them till the stone broke along the center. So there's a lot of things to be learned at these quarries. You can see the the wedge holes all around. Attendance marks, we think they are about all the artisans, the stone cutters who work there. And the quarry is a very lonely place today. Nobody goes there. Pattadakal temples are a UNESCO inscribed World Heritage Site, but nobody goes to the quarry. In fact, it was discovered by illegal quarriers who had exploited the place. There are a lot of vestiges of the Chalukyan workers there. You can see that stones have been cut and kept ready for transport like this. This would have ultimately ended up at the ceiling of some temple or the other, but they have abandoned the site at some point of time. You can see the foundations of the humble abodes in which they stayed while creating these monuments, which we are proud of 1,200 years later. These are the dormitory-like large compounds where many of them stayed. There are also these little rooms where probably artisans of higher esteem stayed there or whatever. And this is yet another quarry. If you go there, you can't see it in this picture, but there's some painting work also, which I think it's here, survives from the early period. And so in this quarry too, you can find things like this is a motif of a horned lion, which is very commonly seen at Pattadakal. This is a closer view of the quarry sketch, and you can see it actually here. There's an elephant and lion shown here. This lion does not have horns, but this one has. It's a mythical creature, basically, a Vyala or whatever. This is there from very early on. What I'm showing you here, this is from the 2nd century BC to 2nd century AD sort of period, in which this Buddhist stupa at Kanaganahalli was carved by under the Shatavahana rulers, and you can see that there are horned lions plenty in their iconographic program also. So yeah, and there are also things like Bactrian camels there, which shows that probably some artisans had come from as far north as Gandhara in present-day Afghanistan. And coming back to Pattadakal, again, some sketches for the sketch studies for the actual icons. This is Vali and Sugriva in battle, and you find that in the Papanatha temple also here. So it's very exciting to walk around in the quarries where these guys would have, lived and worked and thought about these structures which they are going to build, which have ended being our claim to World Heritage status in many of the things. One of these people is a person called Baladeva. So Baladeva Acharya, he's called somewhere. His father, he's the son of somebody called Duggi Achari, who was also a sculptor of repute. Now he is well known for. So this is the inscription which talks about him, and his Dwarapalas or door guardians are actually almost carved in the round. He's emerging almost completely from the stone, and you can see how beautifully he is carved. So Baladeva Acharya was one of the prominent sculptors of Pattadakal. There are plenty, and his name, he is called verily a Vidyadharan in one of the Pattadakal inscriptions, and you can find in the quarry an inscription talking about Sri Veera Vidyadharan, which I think might be the same person. So these are some of his other sculptures, a ceiling of Natesha here, and some of the door guardians in the Papanatha temple also. And so it's very exciting to think that some of these what is the? I'll show you a small video which will give you a feel for the place. This is a lonely windswept hilltop right now where nobody goes. There are only some langurs, having fun there. And to imagine that 1,200 years ago, this would have been a hive of activity. There would have been people breaking stones, people carving it. Some of the veterans like Valadeva Acharya coming and instructing them about what kind of blocks of stone have to be carved for what kind of temple components, sketching out the studies which would become sculptures later on in the. And today, nobody goes there. It's not part of any World Heritage site. In fact, it's under threat from illegal quarrying. I just wanted to show you a place where these guys worked and created some of the wonders that we are very proud of today. So now coming to Badami, I talked to you about this waterfall which starts up. So if it rains for let's say half an hour or 45 minutes, you have this twin waterfalls called Akka and Tanki, elder sister and younger sister. And once the rain stops in half an hour, the waterfall disappears. So you can see it here. So I mean, I was thinking it's a natural phenomenon. Till you can see that when this is when it is raining, it's in full flow, and when the rain stops, you can see that it comes down very little bit, and then it almost dwindles away. Sometimes in the spray, the water never leaves. In the wind, it becomes a spray, and the water never reaches the ground because it's basically a stormwater channel. And then when I was going with these interns at the top of this thing, I realized that this place is artificially cut out. So the waterfall that you see here is not accidental. It's not a natural phenomenon. This basin has been cut out here. So I was looking at my earlier pictures. You can see here close up that this part is it's not natural. It's artificially cut out, a C-shaped basin there. And there's the other part of it. And you can see it with respect to the rest of Badami here. And this one shows the entire thing. I couldn't capture the whole thing in this panoramic view. So this is where the waterfall flows from. And then I remembered an old picture which was just after monsoon, and you can see that all the lines of wetness, which is basically the path along which the water flows, they all come down to one portion. So these guys have identified where the lowest point where all the water comes, and there they have cut out this basin so that the waterfall, they've created this waterfall as a backdrop for their monuments. Now you can say that they could have used it just as a functional thing to, bring the water into Agastya Tirtha. But there is an inscription elsewhere where they talk about the beauty of another artificial waterfall that has been created. So it leaves no doubt in my mind, no room for any doubt in my mind that this has been created by the Chalukyans for as a backdrop to their architecture. And these are places where you can see that this is where the Tangi, the little sister waterfall, falls from, and the elder sister waterfall falls in the foreground out here. That you see here. And these are some pictures of the waterfall when it's there and it's not there. Again, where the thing is getting lost in the spray. And I'll just leave you with this couple of videos that are here. So you can see this video here, which is and it's a low light because it's a stormy condition. These flashes you see are that of lightning. And yeah, so this is again, of course, these temples were not there. They created it as a backdrop for the Bhutnatha temple, not for these temples, which came up later in the 11th century. But it's wonderful to think that these people who are so bothered about the sighting of their creations, because I mean, in architecture, we say that the best architecture is that which responds to the site magnificently, and that has been achieved wonderfully by these artisans. There's one more video. I'll show it to you here. Yeah, so light was very low here, so it's very grainy. But they have, whether it's the placement of their buildings, whether it is creating backdrop for the buildings, they have responded wonderfully to this sandstone cliffs that you have as part of Badami. Yeah. So I've been hurrying through this thing, thinking that the large number of slides, and I may not be able to complete it, but looks like I've finished 10 minutes before time, like it's just 40 minutes now. So this is a view of Badami that I'll leave you with. And these are some of the people who helped me with all these things. So Kalakappa with his auto rickshaw has taken me to so many places where you will not believe an auto rickshaw can go. And Somashekara Kudachi is a tour guide at Pattadakal, but he's much more than that. He is the person who first came to know about the quarry from illegal quarriers, and he is the one who alerted the officers at Archaeological Survey of India, so that today we know some of the old quarries of the people. He is just not a tour guide; he is a researcher in his own right. So thank you very much to Kalakappa and to Somashekara Kallappa Kudachi. And thank you all. I'll stop here, and if you have questions, I hope I can engage you for the rest of the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Srikumar ji, for a lovely, especially for a visual treat that we had today. For sure, there are many questions by Jyoti Kerkar in the chat, and I'm going to read that out to you. So her first question is, are stone temples typical to South India?
No, of course not. Stone temples are there throughout Bharatavarsha, as you could call it, but they start appearing in the archaeological record only at some point. Like we would, if you look at the history of stone structures, the earliest are the rock cut thing where you scoop caves out of the thing. The earliest rock cut temple you'll find the Barabar and Nagarjuni caves in near Gaya. Okay, so which is done during the Mauryan period. So we're talking about 300 BC or something like that. Okay, and then you find the rock. So even in Badami, the earliest structure, the rock cut temples. But then so in northern India you have the Guptas and all that who built the temples. You find the earliest temple you would find in the near the Sanchi Stupa actually, and then the temple. There was a tradition, the Nagara, which developed in northern India, and the Dravida, which developed in the south. But in south you find it only around 6th century is when you find the earliest temple. Somewhere in the 6th century is when you find the earliest temple there. So stone temples are there in north and south. But I was talking about in South India, the earliest ones are in uh, Malaprabha Valley and also in the Tamil country like Kanchi, the Pallavas as well as the Pandyas.
Okay. Her next question is Bhutnath temple. Something more about it? Like, can you speak something more about Bhutnath temple?
Okay, it's interesting because that's a very fascinating place for me also. So Bhutnath temple it's not called Bhutnath. Bhutnath is the current name for it. The name given in an inscription there is Bhuteshwara. So Shiva as Bhuteshwara is a deity there. And I feel it's my conjecture, which I think I have proved it, is that this was actually a place to commemorate dead people. So
Okay.
Shiva as Bhuteshwara, as the Lord of Bhutas. And that's a place where you find a lot of what I think are memorial temple, which, so the nucleus of it was built in the 8th century, 8th century, and then the rest of it came up in the later century, like, Kalyani Chalukya period in the 10th to 12th centuries and all that, the surrounding things came up. But there are so many structures nearby which are commemorative. So, which I think are placed around Shiva as Bhuteshwara to get liberation for the people who are being commemorated there.
Yeah, but we do not know who are these people who are being commemorated
No,
over.
there are no inscriptions. But one of the reasons why we think that there's a small temple, which very small shrine, very close to the rock with all those things there. Inside that, there is a person who is shown with a sacred thread in the other way. Like, normally the way people wear the sacred thread over the left shoulder or whatever, it's called savya. This is apasavya. That is normally do it while doing death rituals and all that. The person is depicted there. It won't be a mistake. It is done with a purpose. So it looks like these structures are for. And to be honest, till ASI took over the site and banned other activity there, people were using that part of the Agastya Tirtha for conducting death rituals even 60 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. She has also asked that have Chalukyas worshipped these, like worshipped in that temple, or
Yeah, definitely. They would see that. I'm not. What Professor Srinivas Padigar tells me is that the idea of thing is that if there's a linga or a temple established in your memory, even if you go to when you go to what do you call heaven or whatever, your
mm-hmm.
stay there depends on how much your punya you have accumulated. So if your this worship continue, your name is still remembered on earth. Okay, then
Right.
you would continue to extend your stay there. That's what it
Yes.
says. So if somebody worships, if I make a linga in my somebody makes a linga in my memory, it will be called Srikumareshwara. Okay, and as long as worship happens there, I would stay in heaven.
There's
Okay.
also a Mexican movie which came, which was also based on this concept. It was a Disney movie.
Okay.
Yeah. So this thing reminded me of that movie.
Okay.
Okay. Coming to other comments, I think there are no more questions.
Hmm.
I would like to read out the comments to you. Adil says, "Thank you so much for the lovely talk. Good to see
Thank
you
you.
online again." Kailash says visited Badami, Aihole, and Pattadakal last year. However, with these new views and details, it seems more trips are required. Thank you so much for an enlightenment talk today. And Adil has a question. Why is in the Ladkhan temple design style not replicated anywhere else in the region or anywhere else in general?
It is replicated actually in the Durga temple complex itself. You have the other temple I showed you, the Gaudara Gudi. It's in that model. So there are 2 or 3 temples there, and you find some of them in the hinterland. So it basically, I would say that this was a local style of building, and also, it's probably not a temple. What
Mm-hmm.
Ladkhan is, there's an inscription there which says something like, the amount of money that has been paid for ceremonies like naming ceremony, the first rice being fed to the Annaprasha, as it's called, for the
Okay.
child, for marriages and all that. So, what some of the scholars feel is that it was probably like a community hall uh, things were where things were done in the presence of the god. So it was more of that sort of a thing. So something, the same thing for the unfinished mantapa that we felt was the same thing here. Probably not temple as such. There's an installation of a Lord there, but God there, but must be for some other activity to happen there in the presence of the God or whatever. So it is there in a limited place, but then the temple forms were subsumed by the Nagara Dravida mainstream thing which came in there from other places.
Okay. I hope that answers Adil's question. Coming back to other comments, Chaitanya Patil says, thank you for the presentation and sharing elaborated details. Prathamesh says, thank you very much for an amazing visual tour. Jyoti Kerkar thanks you and Khaki Lab for such an interesting talk. Again, there's a comment saying, had visited Badami during college days, time to go back again. Kailas is asking a question. Will it be possible to share guides reference?
Okay, I don't have a number with me now. I had it, I lost it when I changed my phone. But you can go to the Pattadakal ASI ticket office and ask for Somashekara Kallappa Kudachi. Somashekara Kudachi will do.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
Mr. Kudachi. If you can't remember anything else, you can say Mr. Kudachi, and he
Sure.
will be hanging around there. He's one of the official guides there, so you can find him.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I hope that answers Kailas's question. Jyoti Kekar says thank you. And with this, we
Then one more question, I think.
yeah,
Ridhved.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you explain the process exactly how they use steel to cut the rock? Because
Hmm.
I heard they used blocks to cut it.
So can I just share that slide again?
Sure.
Okay, so
So
yeah.
they say wood blocks.
Yeah, no, no, not wood. This is a somewhere out here. Let me just come 1 minute.
Sure.
Uh, so normally, what happens is that let's say you need to split the stone along this line. So they
Mm-hmm.
would identify. So there'll be some intervals which they scoop out these holes. Basically, they need to scoop out these holes here. What you can see here, and so this is a hole in the process of being scooped. So this one is a very important piece of stone. I think it should be in a museum somewhere. And what they do is into this holes which are scooped out, they put iron wedges, which are basically just little small blocks of steel, which are rectangular in cross section, wedge shape. They're wedges basically, steel wedges, and they insert it there, and then they hit it with a hammer till hit all the wedges in turn with a hammer till it breaks. I
Okay.
had a video of it, but I didn't include it into this thing. That's the way they still break stones actually. So they put wedges along, they mark a line of wedge holes, make the holes there, and put steel wedges in all of them, and then hammer it in turn. First on the other one, then followed by the other. They hammer it till the stone splits along that thing. And once it splits, you'll be having this kind of marks here. You can see that here it has been removed. Half this oval thing would be there on the remaining on the stone. That's called a wedge mark. Okay, so this is how, what you see here, they put all the lines out here, they would place wedges into each one of these holes and then hit it in turn till it splits along that. So you do it vertically as well as horizontally, so that you get pieces of it.
Yes.
Yeah, this is another line of wedges that you see here.
Okay.
So wood blocks, what they're saying that because there's been a um, uh, theory that people used to put wooden wedges there and pour water on it till the wood expands and it breaks. That might be practiced in some place, but in Hampi and Badami, both I have seen that they use this because they have found even the wedges, the steel wedges, they have found from the quarry used in the Chalukyan time. It is there in the Aihole Museum and the Badami Museum. So you can see
Okay.
that they use. So we know that they used to use steel rather than wooden blocks.
Okay. Fine. Hope that answers Rugved's question. And Jyoti Kirkar says one more. Do you have the pic of the sacred thread with the other way picture?
Okay. Yeah, I can look for it. If there's any other discussion going on, I can look for that at that time.
There's no other discussion.
Question. Okay. Okay. In that case, she can email me. Maybe I can send her that picture.
Sure.
Okay.
So with this, I think we come to an end to today's talk. Thank you so much again for accepting Khaki Lab's invitation and for such a wonderful talk. And thank you to everybody who attended. The recording will be soon available on YouTube channel, and I'm sure people would love to watch this before they actually visit Badami and Hampi and enjoy the sites in person. Thank you so much, Srikumar ji.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.